All right, what's going on, everybody? Broken Games HDR. So it's the end of the year, and that means it's time for me to give you my top 10 games of 2020. So 2020 overall was just a really good year for gaming, in my opinion. 2019, I felt like was pretty lackluster and mediocre, aside from a few very standout games. But 2020 overall was just much more well-rounded, I would say, with the gaming experiences, and I thoroughly enjoyed most of them that I played. So before I get into the actual list, let me just say that the footage you are about to see is not my footage. It is stock footage because I record all my gameplay to my SSD and then I export it to my external hard drive because I have a 16 terabyte external hard drive. But unfortunately, my external hard drive failed, so I had to send it in to be repaired and for all the data to be retrieved. So yeah, that sucked. So that's why I have to use stock footage right now. So let's get into the list. Coming in at number 10 is Streets of Rage 4. Streets of Rage 4 was just a good co op, whether it was online or offline, even though online was a little bit laggy. Arcade beat 'em up experience, right? Any of us who played Streets of Rage back in the day, we know how fun this series is, and I'm glad they brought it back. The gameplay mechanics were good. You had a nice visual art style, and it was just a real quick, fun arcade game to play. Especially on the harder difficulties, if you had somebody with you that knew what you were doing, if you learned the combo system, which had some depth and intricacies to it. So yeah, number 10 is Streets of Rage 4. Definitely a good game. You should definitely play it if you have it. Let's move on to number 9. Number 9 is Spider-Man Miles Morales. So some of you may be wondering why Miles Morales is at number 9 and not at one of the better spots. And it's not that it wasn't like a great game. I think everybody should definitely play it. The story did a great job at kind of laying the foundation for who Miles Morales is as a character for those who may not be familiar with him. And it really established that he is very different from Peter Parker in his personality and with his powers when it came to the gameplay. So they did a good job at differentiating the gameplay when you play as Miles from when you play as Peter in both the story and the gameplay mechanics as well. And they just improved upon the visuals, of course, through the power of the PS5. So it's a I would say it's an improvement in every way. I did enjoy it. I do think the Spider-Man, the original 2018 Spider-Man story is a little bit better, simply because it's a longer game, so they were able to like flesh it out a little bit more. This is a shorter story. It's meant to be compact and everything like that. But the only reason it's number 9 and not at a better spot is just simply because it's still you can consider it an expansion of Spider-Man. Like I said, even though they did a good job at differentiating the gameplay and altering it and changing it up, it's still, essentially Spider-Man, which we experienced 2 years ago, which ain't nothing wrong with that, but it's not necessarily something that feels that new or that different, which, I'm not knocking, but once again, there are games on my list that are, I would say, newer or fresher experiences. So Miles Morales is number 9. Number 8 is Resident Evil 3 Remake. Now, let's just say right off the bat that, of course, Resident Evil 2 was the overall better remake, right? I mean, the original Resident Evil 2 was better than the original Resident Evil 3. So that should be expected, but I think people didn't expect as much as I guess you can consider it quote unquote a fall off from Resident Evil 2 to 3. And I think the fall off was mainly with the story. And because I believe they did cut some story beats and as far as like the gameplay mechanics and I think they felt like I mean it wasn't that we felt Nemesis was a little bit more scripted and less intimidating than we hoped he would be, so that was pretty unfortunate. But overall, the game was just really fun, right? I agree that Resident Evil 2 was a better overall um, um, game, but Resident Evil 3, I would argue with you that it's actually a more fun game than 2, right? And those are two different categories. One could be the better game, but one game could be, a little bit more fun. And I felt Resident Evil 3 was fun. It was fun playing as Jill with her weapons, and then also Carlos sometimes. And the game is more action than Resident Evil 2. Obviously, every Resident Evil game kind of moved in the action direction with every iteration. So that's obviously what Resident Evil 3 did. So it's a little bit more action. I like a good balance. I like 50-50, right? I like when a horror survival game is 50-50 action and 50-50 horror. It's kind of like a hard equilibrium to get to. In my opinion, one of the games that does it perfectly is like Dead Space 2. To me, that's one of the greatest horror survival games ever made. I think that's the perfect balance. But I mean, the game looked great with the RE engine. Like I said, they kind of, you can argue that they messed up with the story just a little bit. Remakes are supposed to kind of flesh out and expand the story a little bit. You can argue that they cut stuff from the story, but the gameplay was just real fun. The combat was fun with the new mechanics, and yeah, it's just something that I thoroughly enjoyed. So Resident Evil 3 is number 8. Number 7 is Gears Tactics. So anybody who knows me knows I'm a huge fan of these type of RTS games, essentially XCOM, and there's a lot of games that are very similar to XCOM where they just take an IP like Gears, for example, and make it into an XCOM game. But it's not just a clone. Of course, they add their own gameplay fundamentals and abilities and perks and mechanics and all that stuff to make it unique and not just make it an actual XCOM clone. Because Gears Tactics plays very different from an XCOM game or any other game in this RTS genre, right? So that's what's always so fun about getting games in this genre is I know I'm going to enjoy it, but I know also going to be different. And what really surprised me about Gears Tactics is how good the story is. I don't think people are actually talking enough about that because probably there's not like I guess a lot of console people who are very much into these type of RTS games. So Gears Tactics isn't getting the attention that it actually should. I mean, the game focuses on the main character, Gabe Diaz, and not to spoil anything, but if you recognize the last name Diaz, then you know who he is. And this takes place prior to the original Gears of War. So it's a Gears of War prequel. So it adds to the Gears of War universe and the lore. And that's what I really liked about it, right? Because one thing that I always say that people don't give Gears of War credit for is even though the continuing narrative with the sequels and the continuing story, I feel like they might have faltered a little bit. The lore and how they expand the universe is like almost unmatched. Like it's just they just did a great job at fleshing out the huge universe and the lore and the history of the Gears of War events. So I'm just happy that Gears Tactics expanded upon that. And the visuals, are real good. Even for an RTS game, there's close-ups and in-game cutscenes that really show off the visuals. Like I said, the story's good, and I just love that gameplay. That they really took like the Gears of War heart and soul and just made it into an RTS. So I put 100 hours into this game. That's how much I loved it. So yeah, Gears Tactics is number 7 for me. By the way, I also platinum Miles Morales because I, did like it that much also. Number 6. Number 6 is Ghost of Tsushima. So Ghost of Tsushima, what surprised me about this game was how deep the gameplay was. Now it's made by Sucker Punch, so I knew the gameplay was going to be good, but I think most people would be lying if they said they expected the amount of like abilities, the skill tree, the combat moves, the customization. I don't really think all of us saw that coming. I mean, when you go into the menu system, you're like, wow, there's a lot of depth uh, to this game. There's a lot of things to unlock. whether it be just for um, aesthetic and the presentation of Jin Sakai, or it's actually stuff that affects the gameplay that you unlock as you go through the story. I don't think most of us, expected that. I mean, especially when there was a lot of people that even doubted this, especially when we saw the game showing off. I think it was at like Summer Games Fest when the Sucker Punch developers were demoing the game. A lot of people said it looked kind of surface level and looked kind of easy. And I knew it was going to have more depth than that, but I didn't think it was going to be this good, right? So, and the visuals, we know the visuals can be inconsistent, but it's also a very, beautiful looking game. I mean, this game was the example, the prime example of why something like photo mode exists. It's literally that. I mean, we saw just amazing terrains, amazing environments, and they're all very different. There's three different islands with, with their own three different looks, and you got to travel through it through horseback. It was just absolutely, it was absolutely gorgeous. Like I said, there is some inconsistencies. You might go somewhere in the game and it looks pretty muddy. The textures aren't the highest, but then you go to a field of flowers, and the weather effects were dynamic and everything like that. You could change them with your flute, and I believe they said the weather changes with your actions with Jin Sakai. So that all that just like created these different environments that you would encounter with different time of day scenarios. So yeah, the visuals and the I would say the art direction was just very impressive. One thing I mainly criticize about the game is the story. The story isn't bad, but there's nothing special about this story really. And I think people hype the story a little bit more than they should have, due to for certain reasons that I'm not going to get into right now. But they definitely hype the story up a little bit more than it is. The story is very basic and straightforward, and kind of surface level. What you see is what you get. It's not more intricate than that, which not necessarily anything wrong with, but there could have been more there. They definitely to us told the story that they wanted to tell. They accomplished that very well. They got the point across. And the actor of Jin Sakai displayed him, I guess, how a samurai or former samurai, I guess, should be displayed. So overall, it's a great game. Um, Definitely a great game, especially gameplay and visuals. There's not many games that do what Ghost of Tsushima does visually, and for people who got to play it for the first time on PS5, then they got the real treat, especially to play at 60 frames. Because unfortunately, I had to play. We those of us who played it at launch played it at 30. And I haven't even booted that game up at 60. I haven't booted it up on PS5 at all because I already platinumed it. Once again, another game I really liked. So yeah, people who waited and played on PS5 got the real treat. So now for the next game. So number five. Number five is Rogue Company. So this is a game made by High Res Studios, a multiplayer third-person shooter. So those of you who know me, once again, know that I'm mainly a multiplayer guy, right? But I feel like I've been deprived of multiplayer experiences that I like for the last, honestly, feels like 10 years. Most of the multiplayer games that I've played in the last 10 years are kind of due to there just not being that much available that I like. I mean, mainly I played Uncharted 4 multiplayer, which I played due to lack of multiplayer games that I like, not because like, oh, I want to play Uncharted 4 multiplayer so bad. And Last of Us Factions, which I do really like, but I definitely don't like it enough to play it for like 7 years straight. That was once again just due to lack of other multiplayer games that I liked. I feel like the multiplayer games that were being made just weren't for me, and they were designed for a different audience, right? And honestly, in my opinion, most of them sucked. And then Rogue Company came along, a game that I was not expecting. And I put 400 hours into this game, into this multiplayer game, since I started playing in the summer. I absolutely adore this game. I play it on PC. Like I said, I have 400 hours. I play it every single day. There's not a game there's not a day that passes that I do not play Rogue Company. And you could ask anybody, in that sees me. I think my Discord status displays it. They see me on Epic on the Epic browser. They know I'm playing it all the time. It's just a great multiplayer game that I feel focuses on individual player skill, but also it's very team oriented with the different modes and the different maps. And one of my issues with a lot of multiplayer games now is they're too ability focused. Like abilities seem to have become like a like almost just too much of a focus, and people lean on it too much. It became a crutch and the centerpiece for multiplayer gaming, when I feel like the ability should always be secondary to player skill and your actual aim. Like, hey, can you aim? Is your aim good? That's what should really determine if you're good at this game or not. And I feel like a lot of games, lack that. It's always like these other gimmicks and these other crutches. And Rogue Company is at the core. If your aim sucks, you're not going to be good. If you can't think fast and move fast and react fast, yeah, you're not going to be good. And that's what I love about this game, is it focuses on all the things that I like in a multiplayer game. So yeah, I got nothing but good things to say about this game, and High Res Studios continues to support it. They're always dropping updates, and whether it be for the gameplay or for the aesthetics and everything like that, they're always dropping and supporting it. And the devs are very vocal on Twitter, so I absolutely adore this game. I absolutely love it. So it's number 5 for me. Number 4 is Ori and the Will of the Wisp. This game has some of the best platforming and some of the best level design I have ever played in any game. Ori and the Will of the Wisp just doesn't get enough, attention, and people don't talk about it enough, in my opinion, for what it is. It's, a living, breathing, water painting. The story is, I'll say, touching and charming. And yeah, the gameplay, they really improved like the combat, because in the Blind Forest, that you can argue there wasn't really much combat, but they've really improved in the combat dimension of this game, and it's just really good. Like the just I can't, like, it's really something you have to experience, like especially when you get further into the game. The level design and the intricacy of it, and the well thought out obstacles are just, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. Number 3 is Demon Souls. Everybody knows I love my Souls game. I've beaten like almost every Souls game there is, with the exception of a few, because there's a whole bunch of Souls inspired games, but I've beaten most of them because I just love the format of Souls games so much. I love what they are and the point of them, right? And I love challenging games. Y'all know I play most of my games on the hardest difficulty, because if I don't have a challenge in video games, then I don't feel like it's fun if I don't have a challenge, right? So I need like a real like challenge, or it's just not enjoyable to me. And I beat Demon Souls 5 times. I know that game like the back of my hand. I platinumed it. I think there was I beat the game at least. I think after I beat it the first 2 times, there was a time where I beat the game again in 1 day. Like, I literally have memorized that game like every step of the way. I can beat it in one day like it's nothing. So yeah, I mean that should tell you everything I feel about that game and why it's number 3. I mean, of course, Blue Point, the way they remade they're the masters of their craft when it comes to that. So they refined the gameplay and the visuals. It looks beautiful, and added some quality of life things. So yeah, Demon Souls is number 3. Of course, another game I platinum, like I said. Okay, number 2. Number 2 is The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Part 2, in my opinion, is one of the greatest games ever made in every aspect you judge a game by. The only the only way I criticize this game is pacing. I do believe the pacing is a bit off, and I think that's something that Naughty Dog, struggles at with a lot of their games that are any game that Naughty Dog has done that's like over, I guess, 10 hours, which isn't necessarily a lot of their games right now. That's something that they've just recently ventured into. But any one of their games that's like 10 hours or over, uh, they just seem to struggle at pacing. But Last of Us Part 2 is just a phenomenal game and one of the best games ever made in my opinion in every single way. I mean, the gameplay, I don't see how anybody could argue or debate the just that gameplay, the combat. The stealth could use a little bit more improvements. I guess you could say they definitely could have added the ability to, for example, move bodies, right? But I think the stealth is great. The combat is amazing. Just the gameplay mechanics, everything feels so tight and refined. I've said it before, Naughty Dog doesn't do everything in their games. They don't do everything, but the things that they choose to do, they decide to do them the best. We may not have all the features that all these other games are going to have, but we are going to make sure the features that we do choose to put in our game, it's going to be the best in our game. It's going to work the best in our game, right? I've beaten this game I think 4 times. I've platinumed it. Um, I've literally studied and read every note collectible to analyze the story because yes, one of the biggest criticisms of this game is the story. I mean, mostly from a lot of people who haven't even actually played it, but I digress. And trust me, I've analyzed every part of this story to see if there are any major flaws, and I don't believe there is. Not that doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean it's perfect. That just means that what they do right vastly surpasses any type of minor flaws. And yeah, this is, and like I said, in my opinion, this is just one of the greatest games ever made. That gameplay is just almost flawless. It's just so good. And I'm somebody, let me just say, and this pertains to Demon Souls and The Last of Us. I'm not somebody who typically likes to play games over and over again. Once I beat a game, I'm typically done with it. Like, because it's usually not fun to me the second time around because it's an experience I already had. The Last of Us Part 2, I beat that game 3 times, and I beat it on when they released the new content for permadeath. I did permadeath chapter, which is where if you die, they reset the chapter. I beat it on that. That's not something I would typically do for a game if I don't like it. I love the game that much that I did all of that for it. And keep in mind, this is coming from someone who did not like the original Last of Us campaign that much. I was in 2013. I picked Tomb Raider for my game of the year over The Last of Us. I was one of and I was getting they were trying to hang me for it when I said, Last of Us, the original Last of Us wasn't that great of a game. The story was okay, the gameplay was worse. Even for its time, the visuals weren't up to par. I said all of those things and people said I was crazy, but the original game just didn't impress me that much. I just thought it was an okay game. But, I honestly didn't even like The Last of Us until I played it on the hardest difficulty, Grounded. When they released the Grounded mode, that's actually when I really enjoyed it because before that, it just kind of felt like I don't know, just a lackluster third person shooter with some horror elements and everything like that with a decent story. Yeah, it just the original Last of Us didn't impress me. It didn't. So, but I did love the multiplayer, of course. But everything, all the criticisms I had from the original Last of Us, they fixed it in the Last of Us Part 2. Everything I wanted Part 2 to be is what I got. And that's why I really feel like it's one of the best games ever made. And I think history will look back kindly on The Last of Us Part 2. I don't care about all this, what people say and user reviews and, the controversy and all that stuff. History will look back very positively on this game. And I don't care what you say about the story. You can't play that game and tell me that gameplay ain't amazing. So and them visuals ain't amazing. But people who want to dislike that game, the only the only way they can like actually fuel their argument is to pretend like this only the story exists and the gameplay and the visuals don't. But let me move on to number one. Number one for me, and this is my game of the year, is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Y'all know I'm a huge Final Fantasy VII fan. You know, the original is one of my favorite games ever, you know, of all time. So this, you know, this shouldn't be a surprise. I like the way they, and yes, this is 1/4 of a game. Doesn't matter to me. You know, I don't see how that matters. A lot of people like to make this argument that like, oh, it's not a full game. Listen, there are DLCs that I like more than full actual games. There are 5-hour games that I like more than 50-hour games. So I don't see how this argument that people make matters. Like, length of a game has nothing to do with the quality. So, you know, people can kill that argument. I like what they did with the story. You know, expanding it. Some of it is filler, but I do still like what they did with the story, making certain changes. I like how they changed up the gameplay. It's no longer turn-based, but you can still like technically play it as a turn-based game. I like this action and real-time combat more. And the visuals are very inconsistent. It's very inconsistent. There's parts of the game where you can look at it and it's like, yo, this game looks terrible. And then there's other parts of the game you would think it's CGI straight out of like one of the Final Fantasy movies, like Advent Children. There's literally parts where it looks like the best game ever and parts where it looks like the worst game ever. So it's very inconsistent, but I love it. You know, it's my game of the year. I had so much fun with it. I thoroughly, you know, enjoyed it. And, you know, it's not all around the best game. It's not even the best game on this list, right? But it's my favorite game of the year out of this list. So that's why it's number one. So yeah, this is my top 10 games, y'all. Let me know your top 10 games. Let me know what you think about my list. Hit the like button, share the video, follow me on Twitter if you're not. Consider becoming a member by hitting the join button under this video. And yeah, hit the notification bell so you can know anytime I upload a video or when I go live. All right, I'm out of here, y'all. I'll catch y'all on the next video. Happy New Year. Peace.